Hey guys, this is Silo here. It is the end of August. It's still beautiful. Okay, quick topic here, and that is why MGTOW has become a very common lifestyle for older men now in Estonia, especially Generation X. As we know, Estonia, a former Soviet country next to Russia, next to Latvia, and close to Finland. It's a Baltic country in northeastern Europe. Okay, Estonia has a really interesting history. It's also a very small country by population and geographical size. For most of their history, it's been under the occupation of different countries. Now, more recently, though, Estonia's really emerged as one of the major players in Eastern Europe. And likewise, you also saw its economy greatly improve from where it was at 30 years ago, right after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And likewise, you've seen a huge change in the relationship environment of men and women. This is really well seen in Generation X. Generation X is about the age group of men that were born between 1963 to about 1979, 1980, more or less. This is an age group that is quite large in this country, in Estonia. It's also the age group that probably experienced one of the biggest changes during their lifetime growing up in this country. Many men today, though, in Estonia actually are single. They've been divorced. They're maybe in an unofficial relationship. And I personally know of multiple guys that are bachelors, and they've been without any relationship now for many years. It's actually became much more common, which is really interesting because in some of the former Soviet countries, it was very common for a man to be married, get divorced, have another wife, and sometimes do this three times over. These weren't wealthy guys by any means. This was also the case with certain people here in Estonia. And as we've seen in other Western countries, with the influence of government and the rise of women in power, there is this natural pendulum swing to embracing MGTOWism. And MGTOWism is very, very powerful in Western countries and countries that have changed their economies greatly in the past 30 years. There's various reasons why this is the case when we look at how the many factors changed here. There's been, of course, the government. MGTOWism is a lifestyle that's based on individualism and often to a very high degree. It's one of the major tenets of philosophy, and it's why it's very well accepted in Anglo and Western countries, because individualism's kind of been the embraced philosophy now for many years, especially on a personal level. And that's kind of the core tenet of the MGTOW way. Anyone that knows about Estonia knows that it's a very individualistic type of country. It's seen in many levels, in many ways. It's also a country where people tend to keep to themselves. It's more of a low-key culture, which actually is well catered to the MGTOW lifestyle, because many men also in this movement tend to have the same kind of personality in same ways. So this is very obvious why this Generation X here would very much identify with MGTOWism. The way in which marriage is seen in Estonia also has a big impact on why it's very much a popular lifestyle here. Many people here may know that marriage is very unpopular right now in Estonia, and it's been this way for several years, according to what people have told me. It's become less and less of a thing like we see, I guess, in Scandinavia, Finland, Sweden, Norway. It's kind of the same thing. Many people have this cohabitation situation, but they will not pursue marriage. And I think also marriage does not offer the same benefits for women that it does in places like US and Canada, which is a big reason of why women pursue marriage today. Is very much tied also to why you guys end up in this MGTOW category. It's very common in Estonia. You'll encounter many men here where they had longer term relationships in their late teens to 20s and maybe into their early to mid 30s, but then often it cuts off. There's no relationships that happen after this point. And I've met probably at least 5-7 guys in this situation. And I know of others that people have told me about. This is interesting because some of these relationships last for up to about 10 years and then they're over. They may or may not have kids. What happens though is that many of these men end up becoming very either disappointed or just kind of not wanting to put the energy into another relationship after these 2 or 3 longer term relationships and just declare themselves over with official relationship. Anyone that knows anything about dating in Eastern European countries know that you can't really take a backseat with relationships in this part of the world. It's the same way in Russia, probably even more so in Russia though. It's a very hands-on kind of second job mindset that you need to have with relationships here. So you can't really just be in the back seat. It of course happens, but it's not as common as we see in the US and Canada. Also keep in mind though, not all MGTOW men consider longer term official relationships as a bad thing, and they'll pursue them. And so Estonia in this sense does kind of offer that for men that want these kind of shorter term relationships, sort of like one night situations, we'll say, because these are also readily found here in Estonia. And these kind of guys, this also is something they can do here. But overall, then the way of life, it's very compatible for the MGTOW system here in Estonia and for these men, whether they've been married in long-term relationships or for whatever reason are mostly single. And that's a key aspect here. Now, also keep in mind that in Estonia, there's not as many younger or older women to go around as you would see in larger countries. Often, I think one sees in these smaller places that the relationships tend to be more set in stone, and there's not you could say the same flow to go around. It's very different in other places, and I've explained this in other videos how it is for younger men, and why it causes dating issues. This leads to older men having a very, very limited selection for dating in Estonia, so they don't really perhaps find something or find a situation that interests them. Some may. It really depends on the guy, but for this reason they'll just opt not to date at all, or not to marry at all, and just do their own thing because there's no suitable situations for them. Another big aspect is lack of financial resources, or the financial resources in the equation. As men get older, many would like to either retire, or they're in a position where they need to save money, or they don't have a lot of money. And it's very common to find men that are both very financially well off in Estonia, that are in their 40s or early 50s, and ones that are also very impoverished. I know of men in both categories. I know multimillionaires here, and I know at least 2 guys that are homeless in this age group. And it's very polar opposites, but within both of these categories, you'll see a common situation, and that's that in both of these categories, finances plays a big part in their lifestyles and how they can live in both cases. Because in one case, the guy has very little, and in the other he has a lot, which he could also lose. So the guy who has very little isn't going to have a whole lot to impress or to perhaps build a relationship with a woman, and the guy who has a lot may not want to pursue that because they don't want to lose perhaps the resources that they've built up. And in these cases, the man who has a lot could lose a lot, or may just not want to get into the situation and the guy who doesn't have a whole lot, they're probably just trying to make it each day and survive. Ironically, one of these guys who I know now, he's actually homeless here in Estonia. He actually had a very good life in his earlier years. He had he was in a position for the first part of his career that was much better than most Estonians, and it just shows how life can change so quickly, and you don't want to put all your hope and all your dreams and aspirations in just one job, or your whole being in a job. You want to have other facets of life there. Another reason why men here would pursue MGTOW in Estonia is because of the social acceptance factor. While Estonia has some traditional elements you would find in other Eastern European countries, in many ways it's very liberal. This, as I've mentioned before, is a big part of lifestyles and the acceptance of different lifestyles. And this is one area where it'd be very easy for a man to pursue this way, a 50, 40-year-old guy, and there wouldn't be a lot of negative scrutiny by other people. Remember here that not all men who identify with this lifestyle are going to tell everyone. They're not going to make this very obvious. They may just embrace this, keep it to themselves, and just go about their day-to-day business as such. And they just carry on. And also understand that unlike in Western countries, something you'll find that's common in Eastern Europe, people don't necessarily harass people a lot in their personal lifestyle choices in the way that people often are led to believe in media. And this guy will just go about his day-to-day affair. This is a big part of different lifestyle choices. This is just the first part of my on this series, and I look forward to everyone's feedback here. If anyone is doubtful about whether MGTOW works for them, just give it a try and see. You may never know. So give me your feedback below, and thank